At 9:47 local time, the USS Gerald R. Ford cuts cleanly through open water, its flight deck silent, its air wing secured, its massive propulsion plant holding a steady rhythm far below the surface. From the outside, nothing suggests urgency. From the inside, everything is already moving. Deep within the ship, a soft alert tone breaks the ambient hum of the Combat Information Center. Not sharp, not urgent. Just enough to draw attention. A single surface contact has appeared on long-range radar. Then another. Then 4 more, almost stacked in time. 6 contacts, materializing across multiple bearings, spaced just far enough apart to suggest coordination rather than coincidence. No identification signals, no automatic transponders, no commercial profiles. The tactical display updates again. Bearings stabilize, speeds increase. 15 knots, 17, 19, all closing. Track and classify, the watch officer says calmly. No one rushes. No one raises their voice. Every movement inside CIC is deliberate, practiced, quiet. Consoles glow softly as sensor operators begin layering data. Surface search radar refines the picture. Electro-optical systems reach outward, pulling silhouettes from the haze at the edge of visual range. Electronic support measures flicker briefly, then settle. Something out there is probing back. The 6 contacts ride low in the water, steel hulls cutting narrow wakes. Not fishing vessels, not merchant traffic. Their profiles are wrong. Their speed curves are disciplined. The spacing between them tightens in small, calculated increments, each adjustment mirrored by the others. This isn't drift, it's geometry. On the bridge, the carrier holds course. Rudder steady. Speed unchanged. A ship displacing more than 100,000 tons does not react to uncertainty. It becomes the reference point and lets everything else reveal itself. The first hail goes out on bridge-to-bridge frequency. Standard phrasing, professional tone, neutral language, no response. A second hail follows, translated. Same result. Silence. Inside CIC, posture shifts without announcement. Not battle stations, not alarms, just readiness. Logs are opened. Timestamps begin running. Every course change, every speed adjustment, every emission is recorded down to the second. On the flight deck, nothing moves. Aircraft remain chained. No engines spin. No crews scramble. That stillness is intentional. Movement would speak. Silence speaks louder. The contacts continue closing, their arcs slowly converging toward the carrier's projected track. Not head-on. Not yet. A shallow fan, widening and narrowing as each ship fine-tunes its approach. Classic pressure geometry. Close enough to force reaction. Far enough to avoid immediate consequence. Closest point of approach begins ticking downward. The carrier's escorts remain outside the developing picture, holding position at range. They watch. They listen. They do not crowd the space. Too many variables too close together only create confusion. This is the carrier's conversation. High-resolution optics finally resolve clean outlines. Angular bows, compact superstructures, forward gun mounts, antenna arrays silhouetted against open sky. Warships. No ambiguity remains. The system assigns provisional classifications. The labels barely matter. Behavior matters more. The Ford continues straight ahead. That single choice forces the math. 6 approaching ships must now adjust constantly to a target that refuses to move. Every correction they make burns fuel. Every heading change exposes pattern. Every brief electronic emission leaves a fingerprint behind. A short radar sweep spikes from one contact, then disappears almost immediately. Too fast to be accidental. too long to escape capture. ESM logged, the operator says. The air above the formation remains empty. No helicopters, no drones, no aircraft of any kind. Whatever this maneuver is, it's being conducted clean. Surface only. That restraint narrows intent without making it safer. Distance drops below a threshold every mariner understands instinctively. At this range, assumptions become liabilities. A late correction here doesn't just risk embarrassment, it risks steel meeting steel. Still, the carrier does not turn. On the bridge, the captain watches the same numbers roll in. He doesn't comment. He doesn't need to. The ship's silence is already an answer. Ahead, the 6 ships begin to shape their approach more aggressively. 2 adjust slightly outward. Another tightens its angle inward. The formation breathes, flexing as it seeks the balance between pressure and control. Closest point of approach now measured in minutes. Inside CIC, sensors continue recording without drama. Radar tracks stabilize. Optical feeds sharpen. Electronic signatures stack neatly into the growing record. The carrier is no longer just transiting. It is documenting. The ocean remains calm. The sky stays clear. No weather to complicate decisions. No clutter to hide behind. 6 warships continue moving in, and the USS Gerald R. Ford keeps coming straight toward them. Shaping the pressure. At 9:52 local time, the geometry shifts. On the tactical display, the 6 surface contacts stop behaving as a single mass. Their vectors begin to separate with intent. 3 ships slide subtly to port of the carrier's projected track. 3 mirror the movement to starboard. The spacing remains disciplined, wide enough to maneuver, close enough to signal coordination. This is no longer shadowing. This is shaping. Formation split confirmed, the Surface Warfare Coordinator reports. The carrier does not respond. Rudder remains neutral. Speed holds constant. 100,000 tons continues forward on a straight line that ignores the choreography forming ahead. That decision forces complexity onto the other side. Each approaching ship must now calculate not just the carrier's movement, but the movement of 5 companions executing the same maneuver in confined space. Every adjustment ripples outward. On the port side, one ship accelerates slightly to preserve lateral distance. On starboard, another eases speed to avoid crossing a counterpart's bow. Small corrections, continuous corrections. Nothing comes without cost. Inside CIC, the picture sharpens with each update. Long-range optics stream live imagery across multiple consoles. Wakes tell their own story, curved, restless, constantly rewritten by helm orders executed seconds apart. These aren't parallel tracks, an analyst notes quietly. They're converging arcs. Bridge-to-bridge hails go out again. Same phrasing, same controlled tone, still no response. That silence matters. Merchant traffic responds. Fishing vessels respond. Even aggressive patrols usually acknowledge presence. Silence at this distance is a choice, not an oversight. The escorts remain outside the tightening geometry, holding their stations like fixed sentinels. Sensors active. Weapons cold. They do not crowd the picture. This remains controlled space, and the carrier owns it. At 9:55, the forwardmost ship in the starboard element increases speed sharply. Its bow wake lengthens, stretching behind it like a taut line. The angle tightens by just a few degrees, enough to draw its projected path closer to the carriers. CPA decreasing, CIC reports. The number ticks down again. Inside the carrier, nothing changes. No alarms, no visible shift in posture. The absence of reaction is deliberate. Reaction would legitimize the maneuver. Non-reaction forces intent to be declared through movement alone. On the flight deck, crews remain locked in routine. Aircraft stay chained. Deck tractors sit idle. From above, the carrier looks indifferent. From inside, it is fully awake. On the port side, the lead ship hesitates. A brief deceleration. The spacing behind it tightens, then corrects. The formation absorbs the error, but the cost is visible. Fuel burned. Rhythm disrupted. Another short electronic emission spikes from one of the contacts. Not fire control, not passive either. Logged. Every emission adds depth to the record. Every correction exposes habit. By now, the ships are visible to the naked eye from the bridge wings. Gray hulls against blue water. Gun mounts forward. Crews visible on deck. No weapons manned. Helmets on. Professional. Focused. Pressing. The carrier's bow cuts a clean line through the sea, aimed straight at the narrowing gap between the two elements. Its displacement reshapes the water ahead of it, wake pushing outward like a physical boundary. The geometry begins to betray the formation. To maintain pressure, the 6 ships must keep closing. To avoid collision, they must also open space. Those requirements conflict as the carrier refuses to yield. One ship drifts half a degree too far inward. Another counters outward to compensate. The crescent flexes. Range under 3 nautical miles, CIC reports. No one on board needs the implication explained. At this distance, steel hulls at speed leave no room for interpretation. Still, the carrier does not turn. The message is implicit and unmistakable. You are the ones approaching. You are the ones responsible for what happens next. At 9:57, the starboard element's lead ship makes a subtle correction, easing its bow away from the carrier's projected track. The move preserves safety without conceding presence, but it breaks symmetry. The port side holds firm. The formation remains intact. The pressure remains real. But the balance has shifted. Maintaining the maneuver now requires more effort with every passing second. 6 ships continue adjusting. One carrier continues straight. And the ocean between them is running out of room, the fixed point. At 10 o'clock local time, the carrier's posture changes, quietly. No alarms sound. No announcements echo through passageways. But inside the Combat Information Center, the focus narrows. The encounter stops being treated as a single formation and begins breaking apart into 6 individual problems. Radar tracks split cleanly. Each contact is assigned its own history. Speed fluctuations, rudder inputs, micro-corrections that never make headlines but always form patterns. The carrier becomes the fixed point in the equation. Maintain steady course, the bridge confirms. The USS Gerald R. Ford does not maneuver to manage the encounter. It forces the encounter to manage itself. Electronic support measures sharpen their filters. What had once been background noise now resolves into structure. Navigation radars cycling faster than necessary. Intermittent sweeps that suggest uncertainty rather than confidence. Each burst is logged, time-stamped, and correlated. Emission profile building, the ESM operator says. The closer the ships come, the more they reveal. On the flight deck, a single helicopter crew mans up. The aircraft remains chained, rotors still. The decision is intentional. Air movement would shift tempo. For now, the carrier allows the surface picture to mature. Long-range optics zoom tighter. Hull numbers resolve. Antenna arrays. Bridge window configurations. Even deck crew spacing becomes data. Every visible detail is captured. every frame preserved. At this range, the approaching ships can see the carrier clearly. The island tower dominates the horizon. The flight deck stretches impossibly wide. There is no ambiguity about what they are approaching. Still, they continue. One ship on the port side accelerates briefly, then throttles back. The correction is minor and unnecessary. It suggests conflicting inputs somewhere inside the formation. The starboard element compensates. Two ships adjust outward to preserve spacing. The crescent flexes again. The carrier does not respond. This is where mass matters, not as intimidation, but as physics. The Ford's displacement pushes water outward, its wake interfering with approach angles and forcing constant helm work aboard the smaller ships. Every correction costs fuel. Every correction steals margin. Inside CIC, updates continue in a steady rhythm. No countdowns, no dramatic calls, just facts. CPA holding, maneuvering load increasing. The phrase lingers. Everyone understands what it means. To remain this close without crossing a line, the approaching ships must work harder with every passing second. The carrier simply exists. At 10:03, multiple ships emit simultaneously. Navigation radar spikes overlap for several seconds, subtle but unmistakable. Multiple emissions captured, ESM confirms. The overlap provides more clarity than any single sweep ever could. Correlation is immediate. Timing, frequency, power curves link cleanly. The carrier is no longer just observing. It is building a library. The helicopter crew receives standby orders, not to intimidate, not to threaten, to observe from a new angle if required. Still, the aircraft remains secured. The surface picture has not yet collapsed. Below decks, the escorts maintain distance, feeding their own sensor data into the shared picture. They do not crowd the geometry. This remains a controlled interaction. At 10:06, one ship makes a noticeably larger correction than the rest, an outward turn just enough to relieve pressure. The move is safe. It is also visible. Formation asymmetry increasing, CIC notes. The crescent still exists, but its curve is uneven now. Some ships are working harder than others to hold position. That imbalance spreads. Another ship eases speed to avoid overtaking a neighbor. The adjustment forces a ripple. The ship behind compensates. The pattern begins to fray at the edges. The Ford continues straight through the center of it all. No hails are answered. No warnings issued. The carrier's message remains structural, not verbal. You approached. You are responsible for staying clear. At this range, the smallest error would be impossible to hide. Sensors are locked. Cameras roll continuously. Every second is captured from multiple angles. The ocean remains calm. The sky stays empty. 6 ships still press inward. One carrier continues forward. And the difference between pressure and control is becoming impossible to ignore. The fracture. At 10:08 local time, the maneuver reaches its limit. It doesn't break all at once. There is no dramatic turn, no obvious signal of failure. The fracture begins with a correction made a fraction of a second too late. On the port side, the second ship in the element tightens its turn to preserve spacing. The change is minimal, barely a degree, but at this distance, small is decisive. Its bow wake curves inward, compressing the gap with the lead ship ahead. Port element compressing, CIC reports. The ship behind reacts immediately, easing speed to avoid overtaking. That deceleration forces the third ship to adjust as well. The effect ripples backward through the element like tension moving along a cable. On the starboard side, the opposite problem emerges. One ship opens its angle too wide, creating excess space. To preserve the crescent, its neighbor turns inward to compensate. For the first time, the 6 ships are no longer executing the same maneuver. They are reacting to one another. The carrier remains constant. The Gerald R. Ford holds course, speed unchanged, rudder neutral. Its mass continues forward, indifferent to the choreography unraveling ahead. At this range, the margin for error collapses into seconds. A late correction no longer affects a single hull. It forces every other ship to choose between maintaining pressure and maintaining safety. CPA trending unstable, CIC calls out. The phrase is clinical. The implication is not. The formation is approaching the point where it must either escalate or disengage. Long-range optics catch the next detail before radar does. On one of the approaching ships, deck crew move toward the bridge wing. Binoculars rise. Another crewman signals aft. Quick, sharp gestures. Coordination is no longer seamless. Electronic support measures register another emission spike. Longer this time, less controlled. Someone is searching for confirmation, not projecting confidence. Logged, the operator says. The helicopter crew receives the go signal. The aircraft lifts smoothly from the flight deck, rotors cutting clean air. No aggressive maneuvering. No dive toward the formation. It climbs to a controlled altitude and holds position off the carrier's starboard quarter. From there, the picture changes. Downward-looking sensors reveal spacing errors invisible from the surface. Wake interference. Bow waves colliding. Helm corrections stacking atop one another. Visual confirms loss of formation symmetry. The aircrew reports. The helicopter does not approach the ships. It does not overfly them. It simply exists, quietly, unmistakably, in their peripheral vision. The effect is immediate. One ship on the starboard element eases its turn further outward, increasing distance from the carrier's projected track. The move is safe and decisive. Another follows. The crescent opens. On the port side, the lead ship hesitates. Its bow angle shifts slightly away from the carrier's path. The correction is measured, cautious, but final. Port lead adjusting course, CIC notes. The pressure that has been building for more than 20 minutes begins to bleed off, not through retreat, but through preservation. No orders are heard over the radio. No verbal concession is made. The change is communicated entirely through movement. The carrier continues straight, now passing through a widening gap that did not exist moments earlier. The helicopter holds station, sensors rolling, documenting the transition. Every adjustment is time-stamped, every heading change preserved. At 10:12, the closest ship crosses its minimum safe CPA and begins opening distance. Its wake straightens. Speed stabilizes. Others follow. The formation does not dissolve. The ships remain present, visible, alert. But the geometry has changed fundamentally. What had been a coordinated pressure maneuver is now loose parallel movement. The difference is unmistakable. On the bridge of the Ford, the captain watches the range begin to increase. He gives no order. None is required. The ship's silence has already answered every question. Resolution without sound. At 10:15 local time, the geometry settles. Not abruptly, not dramatically. It resolves the way pressure always does when it can no longer be sustained. Quietly, increment by increment. On the tactical display, vectors that once converged now run nearly parallel. Distances increase by tenths of a mile at first, then steadily. Speeds normalize. Headings straighten. What had been a tightening equation relaxes into predictable motion. The USS Gerald R. Ford continues on course. No acknowledgement is transmitted. No signal is sent. The carrier does not recognize the shift because it does not need to. The encounter has already concluded in practice, even if it never ends in words. Inside the Combat Information Center, posture eases, not to relaxed, but to complete. Tracks stabilize. Alerts downgrade automatically. Logs move toward closure. Event timeline nearing completion, the watch officer says. Radar histories are archived. Optical feeds are indexed. Emission captures are correlated and stored. Every maneuver is preserved as data. Clean, chronological, indisputable. The helicopter recovers to the deck without flourish. Rotors spin down. The aircraft is secured. Its recordings are already flowing into the ship's systems, stitched seamlessly with radar and surface imagery from below. From every angle, the same conclusion appears. The pressure ended not because it was countered, but because it could not be maintained. On the surface, the 6 warships remain visible. They do not flee. They do not fully withdraw. Presence remains, but presence is not pressure. The distinction matters. Pressure demands reaction. The carrier gave none. At 10:20, the nearest ship opens lateral distance beyond the range where course ambiguity matters. Others follow. The formation stretches, then flattens, until each ship is once again responsible only for its own movement. The moment passes without ceremony. On the bridge, the carrier's wake rolls outward, unbroken. The horizon ahead remains clear. The Ford's size, speed, and steadiness have accomplished what warnings and weapons never needed to. Control was established by refusing to surrender it. No shots were fired. No missiles were armed. No aircraft launched in anger. Yet the outcome is definitive. In modern naval encounters, escalation is not measured by noise, but by who forces whom to adjust. Here, only one side did. The 6 warships resume routine spacing, no longer bound by one another's movements. Their earlier coordination, tight, deliberate, demanding, has dissolved into normal transit behavior. The carrier does not slow. It does not look back. Below decks, analysts replay segments of the encounter in silence. Not for celebration, but for study. These are the moments that matter later. Not the dramatic ones, but the restrained ones where intent is revealed under pressure. The Ford's role is not framed as confrontation. It is framed as passage, a lawful transit through open water, uninterrupted. That distinction carries weight. In maritime operations, legitimacy is as powerful as firepower. A ship that holds course without provoking, without yielding, and without misstep becomes the reference point against which all other actions are judged. The 6 warships tested that reference. They found it immovable. As the range widens further, radio silence persists. No explanations are offered. None are required. The record speaks for itself. To an outside observer, nothing happened. But for those who later studied the data, everything did. 6 warships moved in on a carrier. The carrier did not turn. And in that stillness, control became unmistakably clear. When steel meets restraint, and restraint does not yield, the result is not drama. It is dominance, quiet, procedural, complete. What actually happened? By 10:28 local time, the encounter no longer exists as motion. It exists only as record. On the surface, the 6 warships have settled into routine spacing. Their earlier coordination dissolved into ordinary transit behavior. No ship turns away dramatically. No hull breaks formation in retreat. From a distance, it could appear as though nothing unusual occurred at all. That illusion is the final product of the encounter. Inside the USS Gerald R. Ford, the event is already being reframed, not as confrontation, but as control exercised without escalation. The distinction matters. In modern naval operations, legitimacy is not established by dominance alone, but by discipline. A ship that holds course, adheres to international norms, and refuses to be coerced becomes the standard by which every other action is judged. The carrier did not maneuver to avoid pressure. It did not respond to intimidation with threat. It did not escalate to de-escalate. Instead, it removed ambiguity by refusing to move. That single decision forced the approaching ships into an unsustainable equation. To maintain pressure, they had to close distance. To remain safe, they had to open space. The carrier offered no compromise between those requirements. Every correction they made exposed coordination strain. Every omission revealed uncertainty. Every micro-adjustment shifted responsibility onto them. The Ford remained constant, geographically, procedurally, legally. In naval encounters like this, the outcome is not decided by the closest point of approach, but by who becomes the fixed reference point. The side that forces the other to maneuver controls the tempo. The side that refuses to maneuver controls the outcome. Here, only one side adjusted. No warnings were issued because none were required. Warnings concede leverage by acknowledging risk. The carrier's silence placed the burden of safety entirely on the approaching formation. That burden grew heavier with every passing minute. The presence of the helicopter was not intimidation. It was confirmation. Once airborne, it removed the last remaining uncertainty. Spacing errors, wake interference, and coordination breakdowns became undeniable. The moment those realities became visible, the maneuver collapsed on its own. Not through retreat, through preservation. That distinction is critical. The warships did not disengage because they were ordered away. They disengaged because continuing would have required escalation, and escalation would have exposed intent beyond plausible deniability. By opening distance, they preserved presence while abandoning pressure. The carrier did not win the encounter in a cinematic sense. No weapons were activated, no commands shouted, no flags waved. It passed through it. And in doing so, it established a boundary without drawing a line. Later, analysts will study the encounter frame by frame, not to celebrate it, but to understand it. These are the moments that shape future behavior. Not battles, but tests. Not confrontations, but calibrations. Every Navy watches how pressure is applied, and how it fails. The lesson here is not about size or firepower. It is about restraint used as leverage. When a ship holds course, holds law, and holds discipline under pressure, it removes options from the other side without ever issuing a threat. The 6 warships approached with coordination. They departed with separation. Nothing exploded. Nothing escalated. Yet the outcome was decisive. Because in modern naval strategy, control is not proven by how loudly you act, but by how little you need to do. 6 warships moved in on a carrier. The carrier did not turn. And when the water finally opened between them, the message was already complete. Written not in words, but in space.